Folks, we are finally at the conclusion of what's been, in my opinion, a really enjoyable look back at some classic SummerSlams through the years. Not necessarily great SummerSlams, just classic SummerSlams. Now, last week here on the channel, I talked about SummerSlam 2003, and I did want to add a quick little addendum to the end of my rant about Goldberg not winning the championship at Elimination Chamber in that year's show. It's been brought to my attention. People reminded me of something that I even said in my original review about Goldberg's time in the company way back at the beginning of this channel, was that, it was considered that he was being punished because he didn't take extra dates on an overseas tour to replace the injured Triple H on that run. So not being seen as much of a team player, they decided they wouldn't put the belt on him just yet as kind of a punishment for that. And I guess that's, in the world of WWE and professional wrestling, as to why people win and lose matches, that's as valid a reason as any, I guess. But even if that is the case, I still stand by the fact that just from a business standpoint, flow of the product standpoint, a convenience standpoint because of Triple H's injury, I just maintained, it still would have been fine if Goldberg won. That's all I was saying. So I apologize for omitting or forgetting to mention that little detail in the last video, because it is important to add details to why Goldberg might not have won the belt, but I still stand by my opinion. But anyway, who cares about Goldberg now? Because it's 2004 and that fool is gone, baby. He left after WrestleMania 20, and boy, what a difference a year makes in the product from 2003 to this SummerSlam 2004 from August 15th at the Air Canada Centre in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, aka Bizarro World. This show was nominated by Edward Economist, The Shackster, Joe White, and Rajan Murik over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret. And yeah, take a look at what happened in SummerSlam 2003 and just look at where some of those players are today. Eddie Guerrero has won and lost the WWE Championship. Chris Benoit obviously won the world title at WrestleMania and is still the champion going into this show. He has been on a real strong run of pay-per-view wins, though he has been stuck in Evolution purgatory for the entirety of his reign. More on that later. Some big changes happening on the SmackDown side of things as well the last couple of months. After WrestleMania 20, Kurt Angle became the new general manager of SmackDown, and in the last several weeks he's been fired from that position, and we'll get more into the details of that a little bit later, but he's replaced by the new SmackDown GM, Teddy Long, becoming one of the longest reigning and most beloved authority figures in WWE history. It's crazy to think that just before Long got this position, the last thing he was doing on TV was managing Mark Jindrak, who was doing a wannabe narcissist Lex Luger gimmick. Literally 2 weeks before he became the GM, that's what he was doing on TV. I really enjoyed seeing a lot of the Olympic parody marketing that was going on during the month of August, because the Olympics were happening at the same time period. I was kind of disappointed because beyond the little bit in the opening hype package in this show, there really is no other Olympic imagery or themed kind of look for the show, and I thought that's kind of a missed opportunity. 17,640 folks sold out the Air Canada Centre, 320,000 pay-per-view buys, down from the 465,000 the previous year. Jim Ross and Jerry King, Jerry the Lawler for Raw, Carlos and Hugo for the Spanish-speaking viewers, and Michael Cole and Taz for SmackDown. The opening matchup is going to see not one, but two championships not being defended on this year's show, as Cruiserweight champions Spike Dudley and the Dudleys take on Rey Mysterio and the tag champions Paul London and Billy Kidman. So yeah, Spike Dudley is a baddie now. The last several weeks, he's been trying to reject Bubba Ray and Devon's offers to help him out in matches, actively saying, no, I don't want you in my life. I don't want you anywhere near my business. They actually do cost Rey Mysterio the Cruiserweight Championship to allow Spike to win the belt. He actually pissed about that, but then he was just rusing them, and it's revealed that Spike has been the ringleader the entire time as of late. He's even called the boss of the Dudleys. It's just weird to me, because after the storytelling of years of history, years across multiple promotions, where Bubba and Devon have done everything in their power to just destroy Spike in every facet, even recent history in WWE. The fact that Spike has somehow managed to manipulate his way into being the one in charge is very weird. The Dudleys, it seems weird to see the Dudleys as henchmen to anyone, much less Spike. I mean, it's an interesting twist on Spike's character. It's very interesting to see him as a heel here, but it's still kind of weird to reconcile that history. Some quick offense by the Babyface Brigade. I love London doing this quick stomp on Devon's back. Spike with a double stomp of his own as he takes over, starts to feel himself here. London takes lots of heat. Devon hits him with a big power slam. We get this accidental collision between the Folklore brothers, and that gives Paul a chance to get the hot tag to Rey Mysterio, who gets some moves off on the champ. Spike using his head as a battering ram, leaving himself open to a flying Kidman attack. All 6 men are in the ring for a second. London launching off his partner's back, dives onto Bubba on the outside. Spike set up for the 619. Rey connects. Kidman with the shooting star press and goes for the cover, but Devon makes the save. Rey eats barricade. London takes a ridiculous bump on the floor. Kidman is hit with a 3D. Spike picking up the scraps, getting the cover, and the win for those damn dirty Dudley dogs. I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. It's a fun match, it's great to see, the cruiserweights get a chance to shine here. It's mostly cruiserweights in this matchup. But hey, if there's any 2 wrestlers who are great for throwing like cruiserweight style guys around, it's Bubba Ray and Devon. So I think this was a good just clashing of styles here, setting up the Dudleys as this, this heel conglomerate. Again, still trying to figure out why and how Spike became their leader in all this. But again, it's an interesting twist, and it's curious to see how far this association goes. But yeah, I thought it was, just the right amount of excitement in this relatively short matchup for a good opener. Up next, the Till Death Do Us part. Oh, no. I didn't want to talk about this storyline anymore, man. I told myself a long time ago I retired it, but, I booked myself into a corner this week, gang. And I guess for, historical integrity, if you want to call it that, we got to talk about this match with Matt Hardy and Kane. So yeah, Kane is still a crazy little guy after being unmasked last year, still been on the warpath. Lately, his target du jour has been the lovely Lita, and long story short, Kane forces Lita to sleep with him in order to attempt to spare Matt Hardy, Lita's boyfriend, from further horrific beatdowns by Kane. And I tell you one thing about talking about this storyline has taught me. There are a lot of people out there who don't know what the definition of rape is, who don't understand what consent is, because the number of people who've tried to defend this storyline to me saying, no, this is not rape because Lita chose to do it. She chose to sleep with Kane after her boyfriend was being threatened. It's totally consensual, totally not rape. I'm begging you guys just to pick up a book or something. Anyway, Lita becomes pregnant, but she's unsure who the baby's daddy is until the week before SummerSlam when the results of the big DNA test come back. By the way, the length you have to go to get DNA, a sample from an in utero fetus to match up with a father, is crazy to me, especially in 2004. So all I can say is I hope that WWE footed the bill for these very costly medical procedures. Lita breaks the news to Matt that the baby is not his. Matt takes it out in a way that seems kind of victim-blamey. And then we have this matchup here where the winner of the match gets to marry Lita. And with that out of the way, let's take you to what Lillian Garcia calls the Till Death Do Us Apart match.
The following is a Till Death Do Us Apart match.
Lita shows up first. She smiles for Matt, frowns for Kane. Matt's off to a hot start, even hitting a duper side effect off the second turnbuckle. It's not a super side effect. That would be if it was the top turnbuckle. This is just a duper side effect. Hits an odd-looking tornado DDT as well. Awkward-looking landing there. Kane begins to overpower, but Hardy lures Kane into the ropes to dump him outside. Hardy hitting the twist of fate on the floor, but Kane's able to sit up and answer the 10 count. Lita brings in the ring bell and distracts the referee as Matt dinks Kane with it. Still not enough for a 3 count. By the way, why is this match not no DQ? That feels like a kind of match where you really want to justify using weapons to beat somebody up, yeah? Kane catches a flying nothing with a goozle, but Matt fights out. Kane goes up top. Matt pursues him, but that costs him dearly. Kane hitting that with a super choke slam off the top rope. Holy shit, what a bump. Kane with the cover and the count to win. Great call by Jim Ross where he goes, the reality of the finality. Kane going after Lita, who does, well, some type of run. I give it 1 star out of 5. I was pretty shocked initially seeing how short this matchup was, because given the stakes and the grudge underneath this matchup, you'd think it would be given a bit more gravitas. Again, I thought that it really could have used a no DQ stipulation, because the match just felt kind of vanilla to me in that respect. I mean, going back and doing the research, you realize, oh, that's right, Matt Hardy was dealing with a serious knee injury at the time. That's probably why the match was so short. It's a wonder he wrestled at all. And then, of course, he would get written off officially during the wedding of Kane and Alita a couple weeks later on Raw, and then him being written off for injury would then set off this entire chain of events that are pretty crazy in hindsight, but we're not going to get into all that shit right now. The point is, this storyline continues. Lita marries Kane, and she eventually loses the baby. And yeah, it's a shitty storyline that somehow ends up with Kane being a good guy. Evolution's Randy Orton is in the promo zone. He says tonight is a night for celebration. It'll go down in history. He puts himself over as young, charismatic, and good-looking, and here's a good look at the future of this company, because in comes John Cena. Yo, kids, he's still the doctor of thugonomics here, and the shtick's not gotten old yet. He surveys the audience if they like Randy Orton, and they don't. They ask if he'll beat Benoit for the title, and we get kind of a mixed reaction to that, interestingly. Cena takes his leave. Orton continues his rant, says it's telling that Cena had to bogart in on his mic time to make an impact. He says he will beat Benoit and become the youngest world champion tonight. So that segues into our next matchup. It's the first in the best of 5 series for the undisputed US title, as Booker T takes on John Cena. There has been some controversy surrounding the belt as of late. Of course, Cena won the belt at WrestleMania 20, beating the Big Show, and then recently was stripped of the belt by crooked GM Kurt Angle. Angle had planned to just hand the belt to Booker T, but he eventually did earn it proper in a match a week or two later. Then after Kurt's firing his general manager, which again, I will get into the details of how that happens a bit later, because it's worth talking about. The new GM, Teddy Long, comes along and makes this series to determine an undisputed champ. Booker T, of course, has big history when it comes to best of series. I mean, a real star-making run for him was in WCW when he and Chris Benoit had the best of 7 series for the World Television Championship. I mean, it made that belt kind of a favorite, an underground favorite for a lot of wrestling fans at the time, and also just gave a lot of respectability and cred to both those guys. And so Booker seems like the perfect kind of foil for Cena here. Booker gains control after crotching Cena onto the top rope, then dumping him out, hard landing by Cena. Booker jumps off the apron and hits a super backslap. The Booker man continues his heat with a leg lariat, wearing down his opponent. He goes for the axe kick and misses it. Cena begins to make his comeback. Booker cutting him off with a flapjack, hits the spinneroonie, but then Cena gets up and hits the FU to win the first match in the series. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. It wasn't really a bad match, it was just a truncated one. It was just kind of because, you know, you've got a whole series of these guys. It's gonna go 5 matches, so I imagine they want to keep a few things, you know, close to the vest, and you'll have more time for more matches down the line. Cena would go on to win the series overall, regain the title at the No Mercy pay-per-view in October. We see Theodore Long in his office celebrating his handiwork. Then Raw GM Eric Bischoff enters and introduces himself. Eric points out that every time he comes to an inter-brand show, there's always a new general manager for SmackDown, and has made a similar prediction for Teddy's tenure in that position. Teddy tells Eric he has no problem taking nephew Eugene to SmackDown and making him the biggest superstar ever. How did you say that line with a straight face, Teddy? On we go to a triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship as Edge defends against Chris Jericho and Batista of Evolution. Here's the basic breakdown of how this match came to be. Edge and Jericho have been fighting a lot over the last several weeks over the Intercontinental Championship, and then one day they're like, hey, Batista isn't doing anything for SummerSlam, let's throw him into the mix. The champion not exactly over like Rover in his hometown of Toronto. In fact, Jericho gets a bigger reaction, and he's from Winnipeg, you idiot. This is the first real significant match we're going to see the audience kind of take on a life of its own and become a character in the show, as it were. Every time they refer to Canada as Bizarro World for the next several years, this show is pretty much the reason why, because it's one of the most crazy examples of the audience in Canada just kind of saying, no, we're not going to do what the WWE narrative is telling us to do, and we're just going to do opposites, even if it doesn't make any sense. Edge gets jumped mid-entrance by Batista, who's just a freak of nature in this matchup, overpowering Jericho a lot. He goes for the powerbomb, but Edge re-enters the ring and chop blocks the animal. Flying nothing by Edge, Batista sees it coming. Edge drop kicks Batista, who can't quite make it out of the ring. Let's try it one more time. All three men are on the outside. Batista's laid out, so we get Edge and Jericho for a moment. Some good back and forth. Jericho getting the bulk of the cheers as he puts the walls on Edge. Batista returns to break it up. Edge sets up for the spear to Batista. Jericho cuts him off, but walks into a spinebuster. Down to Jericho and Edge again. The crowd very pro Jericho at this point. Chris hitting bats with a triangle dropkick, but the distraction's enough for Edge to hit the spear on Jericho to win and retain, and the crowd goes wild. They do not give a shit. The hometown boy just won the match. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. This was a weird mashup of wrestlers at this time. Not necessarily a bad mashup, because I don't think it was a bad match. It was just like a matchup that at the time I probably never would have thought to think about, never thought that it would be on a pay-per-view. I feel sometimes the Intercontinental Championship or the US Championship is just the one where, hey, let's put a bunch of guys in this matchup, try and throw a few storylines together at once and kind of somehow make it about the belt as well. And so this is another example of that. I forget that Edge's heel run that begins later this year, really the wheels start turning at this point for him. Actually, to be honest, it's probably a little before that, because I can recall by the time Edge beat Randy Orton to become the Intercontinental Champion just after his return from neck surgery and whatnot, I remember there being some bit of online pushback about Edge's return. They thought that whatever momentum and whatever kind of optimism people had for him pre-neck injury seemed to go away, because I guess they felt that he, took the belt from Randy Orton so quickly. It was ooh, we don't like that this is happening so quick. And so now we're going to reject that, because we've seen that happen a lot historically in wrestling. So I think that was kind of the beginning. Edge's return wasn't really met with a full-throated fervor like some other wrestlers do when they come back from injury. And so that, that checks out as to why Edge would kind of turn on the fans and call them all big fat failure turtles within a couple years. Time now for a WrestleMania 20 rematch as Eddie Guerrero takes on Kurt Angle. As I mentioned earlier in the review, Kurt had been the general manager for several months. He was wheelchair bound over the last several of those months after he was chokeslammed off a ledge by the Big Show on SmackDown, and he landed and broke his leg and cracked his skull, but he was still alive and managed to be a fine, fully functioning authority figure for quite some time. But he was showing a lot of heel tendencies as time went on. He declared Bradshaw the new WWE champion at the Great American Bash. Then he screwed Eddie out of a cage match for the championship versus JBL on SmackDown, disguised as El Gran Luchador. So here's how Kurt eventually loses the position as general manager. So he is telling Eddie Guerrero he's got to come out and he's got to beg for his job. All night on SmackDown, he's been firing people left and right just because he can, because he's a big old meanie. So finally, at the end of the show, he goes and he says, Eddie Guerrero, you must come out here and beg for your job. And then Vince McMahon shows up for the first time in a while and has something to say. He's got a gripe with Kurt because when you got handicapped, Kurt, that made me qualified for a humanitarian award that I was going to receive because, oh, look how nice I am for hiring a handicapped person in this high-ranking administrative position. But now that you're not handicapped anymore, I don't get the humanitarian award. Therefore, I don't like you anymore, and now you're back on as an active wrestler. That is literally what happened. So anyway, this all stems to the fact that Kurt is still salty about how he lost to Eddie at WrestleMania 20. He can't respect Eddie because he has to cheat to beat him, and a great line by Eddie in their promo off saying, maybe I can't beat you without cheating, Kurt, but what if I can? Cool line there. Kurt comes out with his heavy Luther Reigns, no relation to Roman. He's going to be at ringside. The crowd is very pro-Angle to start things off here. Some nice mat work between the two. Eddie is holding his own against the gold medalist. He's even the first one to actually get the ankle lock on his opponent. Kurt with the thumb to the eye, hitting the Angle slam. Both men are fighting for the ankle, but Kurt ends up with the hold. Referee's distracted. Reigns getting the cheap shot in. Eddie fights back with his own eye rake, but Kurt picks the ankle again. Kurt starts to undo undo Eddie's boot, shades of Wrestlemania, when Eddie undid his own. Angle keeps applying the pressure on the leg, but Eddie fights back and hits his own angle slam. He hits the Three Amigos, bad ankle and all, goes up top to go for the frog splash, but Kurt meets him up there, hits that beautiful suplex. Kurt is now pulled off the boot entirely and puts the ankle lock on again. Eddie escapes, but Angle collides with the referee. Eddie grabs the boot, decks Kurt with it, hits Luther Reigns, and plays dead as the referee comes to. Oh, Eddie, you scamp. Guerrero hits the frog splash. Kurt kicks out. Taz goes, Jiminy Crickets! Eddie pleads his case to the referee, but Kurt catches him in the ankle lock again. This time there is no escape. Kurt cranks the leg and Eddie taps out. Kurt wins. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. This match did feel kind of one note to me. I do appreciate on one level the story of repeatedly going for the leg. It's pretty much what both guys did here, but that's like all they did. I think you can forgive them though, considering that Eddie Guerrero was dealing with a hamstring injury at this time. He was actually just not wrestling for several weeks in order to heal from it, and so the fact they were still able to have this really intense match with a really, easy to see story, I think made it very impressive. He was able to do all that, and nice callbacks to WrestleMania 20. The thing with the crowds here, and I talked about it earlier, how they're just kind of being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian more often than others, because sometimes you could say, well, like sometimes you could look at this and see, oh, it's like a reflection of what some fans feel about the booking, they don't agree with it. But like Eddie is very much the baby face, like in storyline. There's nothing really happening at this point from my observations as a fan during this time to think like, oh, well, he's getting overexposed, or oh, more people want to cheer Kurt than cheer Eddie at this point. And this doesn't really feel like it's indicative of that at all. Again, it's just the Toronto crowd doing opposite day. That's pretty much it. Up next, Eugene! Eugene! I'm really mean! I'm gonna kick you in the spleen! That's right, Triple H, who last year main evented SummerSlam, and the year before that was in a terrific match with Shawn Michaels' big return. Here he is fighting Eugene. How did we get here? The story of Eugene is quite a fascinating one, how we got to this point. I've done a whole video on Eugene's run in WWE, and so I'm not gonna go into all the details about it here, but Eugene was a very special character, very much a novelty act, it would seem. Earlier in the year, while doing this promo with The Rock, Eugene says his favorite wrestler is Triple H, which of course is kind of meant as seemingly kind of a throwaway gag line here at this point, but it becomes kind of planting the seed for a very long-standing storyline in which Triple H and Evolution bring in Eugene, and they try to manipulate him to do Triple H's bidding in his war with Chris Benoit for the World Heavyweight Championship. Ultimately, this plan does not work. Eugene fights back, costs Triple H the rematch, not only the match at Vengeance the previous month, but also costs him the Iron Man match on Raw a couple weeks later. And so now the mask is totally slipped for Triple H. He's showing his true colors, assaulting Eugene, assaulting his handler, his mentor, William Regal, which did give us, it's worth pointing out, it did give us some of the best William Regal character work you will ever see. I mean, his brief time as a babyface, as someone who comes around to caring for Eugene and sympathizing with him and wanting to protect him, and the way he stands up for Eugene to Triple H, and that promo where he calls him out and he wants to, I will gladly take off this, change into my wrestling attire, and I will beat the bloody hell out of you, and this and that. And like, that was some great stuff. And it's all facilitated through this Eugene character. But Triple H also is a very evil man. So he beats the bejesus out of Eugene, beats even worse bejesus out of Regal, does it again in their hotel room. It looks just really violent and horrific. But Eugene is driven, he is motivated, and he is heartily booed as this match begins, as you might expect. Triple H using Lillian Garcia as a human shield early on. Eugene goes to help her, allowing the H-Man to capitalize. Trips teasing a suplex over the top rope and through the Spanish announce table on the outside, which seems a bit contrived, but Eugene fights back. At one point in the match, the fans are simultaneously booing Eugene and counting along with his corner punches. How do you do that at the same time? Triple H appears to go down with a leg injury. The referee even throws up the X. Ooh, I think he's really hurt, you guys, but psych, Triple H tricks the huge man. He's got a big shit-eating grin. Oh, he's so evil. Eugene fights back. Trips wants to beg off. Eugene accepts that handshake attempt and turns it into the rock bottom. He goes to the people's elbow, but Triple H hits the spine buster, just abusing Eugene in and out of the ring for a good while. Jerry Lawler says Eugene's being taken to school and doesn't even need the short bus. Ugh. Triple H goes for the pedigree, but Eugene with the counter starts to Eugene up to more boos, but then he hits the stunner, which gets a huge pop. This crowd does not know what the fuck they want. In comes Ric Flair to a chorus of woos. Eugene hits the big boot and the leg drop. Triple H kicks out, unlike what happened when he faced the actual Hulk Hogan, by the way. Another pedigree attempt is blocked. Eugene hits one of his own. Flair puts H's leg on the rope, but he's ejected for his troubles. In comes a heavily bruised Willie Reeves, who knocks Flair out with the power of the punch. Eugene is distracted by all that, turns around, and finally takes the pedigree. The H-Man wins. Regal enters the ring to check on young master Eugene as Triple H just drags Flair's carcass up the ramp. I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. I think, you can give these guys in the match a lot of credit because this was a tough crowd. They were doing the whole opposite day thing, but the fact that they got Toronto to cheer Eugene on in the end and be fully on his side after they were really just booing the crap out of him for a lot of the match before this, I think shows it's a good testament to those two abilities to tell the story and to get the crowd to do what they want them to do. I think that was very smart, and I think that, it goes down a lot smoother than I remember it being the first time it happened. I kind of forgot how much Eugene was kind of able to will the crowd on his side by the end there. And, this is not, maybe it is the beginning of the end for the Eugene character, because he will get flattened again and again by Triple H in the ensuing weeks, and there will be a bounce back. Eugene and Regal will win the tag belts together, and that'll be a nice kind of neat bow on their story together. But yeah, this is as high up on the card that Nick Dinsmore is really going to get at this point. And, say what you will about the character of Eugene, I still think that Nick Dinsmore did a very good job, committing to the role, and he had the wrestling ability to back it up and again make the crowd believe and make the crowd think he actually could win. JR after the match saying the game did not fulfill his vow to end Eugene's career, and in fact Triple H is lucky to win. What do you think of that? And Jerry Lawler goes, well, that's your opinion. Everyone's entitled to one. You're wrong, but still. Up next, a contest that Jonathan Coachman says at the start of this thing is not for the weak of heart. It's Diva Dodgeball as Team Dream, the Diva Search contestants, take on Team Diva, the established ladies on the roster. You've got Joy Giovanni, Amy Weber, Tracy Wright, Maria Kanellis, Christy Hemme, and Michelle McCool on one side. Then on the other side, you've got Trish Stratus, Molly Holly, Jazz, Stacy Keibler, Gail Kim, Nydia, and Victoria. This, of course, all stems from the ongoing Raw Diva Search, and you've got this story here where the ladies, the established ladies in the roster, are resentful of these new ladies coming in, so they really want to make a statement and show them. So they challenge them to a Diva Dodgeball matchup with no real stakes involved. It's a matter of kind of pride and bragging rights, essentially. The coach breaks down the rules, then tries to stir the pot by telling the Divas that Team Dream, they were talking lots of trash. The match begins, a lot of people shouting, take your time, take your time. No one is taking their time. It quickly goes down to 6-on-3 for the Dreamers. How are the Divas this bad at hitting that many stationary targets? They're barely moving. Before long, Nydia is the last one out, and the Dreamers win. Things immediately break down between the Divas. Victoria and Trish get into it, and it becomes a pull-apart. And Jerry Lawler saying, Toronto doesn't even like women. They're booing. Yes, Jerry, it's the fact that it's just that they're women that they're booing. Gosh, I don't know. How do you even rate something like this? I'll give it a half star out of 5 because, no one likes to see a squash match in their dodgeball competitions. I figure if there was more back and forth, hey, the rating might be a bit, higher, more dramatic. A lot of conflicting reports about the worked or shoot nature of the dodgeball competition. People will say, oh, it was a shoot, and the Divas were furious. They were so mad that they lost to these newcomers. Some ladies I've seen interviews with say, well, this is obviously we're working because we're given the job of putting these ladies over. And, it's a safe way to put the inexperienced non-wrestlers over in a thing as kind of frivolous as dodgeball. So I guess it makes sense in that way. Apparently, the ladies were taken to wrestlers' court for losing the Diva Dodgeball match, which is crazy to me that all these guys would get so worked up over a work that they would bring the ladies into wrestlers' court. That is the height of absurdity for me. Up next for the WWE Championship, John Bradshaw Layfield defends against The Undertaker. Well, JBL's made his way out of the Guerrero feud in one piece, but is immediately challenged by The Undertaker, and that's how we get this matchup here. JBL makes his way to the ring, coming out the limo with his new chief of staff, relative newcomer Orlando Jordan, who recently joined up with JBL in the last couple of weeks. Taker comes out swinging early, but JBL fights back, even hits a top rope shoulder tackle early on. Undertaker hits the old school, then the mic check, but we only get a 2 count. Jordan gets a little too involved on the apron, which leads to him taking a big boot. JBL attacks the leg and takes advantage, smashing a chair over the Undertaker's leg. The crowd's making a ton of noise, but it's got nothing to do with this matchup because they're all doing the wave for multiple laps, and then when it dies down, they give themselves an ovation. Amazing. Meanwhile, these two are still fighting. Taker fights back, starts attacking Gibbles on the apron, get a big superplex in the ring. JBL attacks the knee, but struggles mightily to get any kind of leg lock on him. We get a goozle and a choke slam, but there's a kick out. OJ gets involved again. He's knocked out of the ring, but JBL hits the clothesline from hell. Takes too long to cover though, so the challenger kicks out. We get the Patrick flop and a triple down. Jordan throws the belt to JBL, who dings the Undertaker with it. Jordan tries puppetry to command the referee's 3 count, does it very slowly, still stops himself when Taker kicks out. Like, why not go all the way with it? Like, why not make it a fast count anyway? And like, oh no, I guess I better stop the hand. It's like, you're already cheating. Taker hits the last ride. But Patrick takes a long time to make the count, and we get another kick out. Jordan in with the belt again. Taker's had enough and hits JBL with it. The referee catches him, rings the bell, and DQs the Undertaker. Taker gets his revenge though by busting JBL open, slamming him onto the hood of his limo, then chokeslamming him through the roof. My hero. What a warrior. I give it 2 stars out of 5. I think the match went on way too long and had way too much bullshit for it to have a DQ finish at the end. I remember reading that The Undertaker apparently offered to put over JBL clean, but apparently they decided they didn't want to do that. Obviously, this goes a long way in making you want to hate John Bradshaw Layfield even more because he's still a relatively new character. You got to get him over because now he's got backup and he's winning these matches through all these underhanded means. So yeah, you definitely want to see him lose the belt. So mission accomplished in that way. But I mean, the match itself, the crowd was hilarious at times during this matchup, but it was like, I don't think it didn't affect my thought of the match itself. I tried to really focus just on the in-ring stuff, and I thought, yeah, it just went a long time, and man, for all that shenanigans and bullshit to happen, for it to have the DQ finish on top of that, it's just a sour ending. Before the main event, Jerry Lawler's talking about the Bizarro Land crowd again. He says, they remind me of, and he's cut off by the music and goes, well, it reminds you of what? What were you going to say in response to the crowd being contrarians? I really want to know what the end of that sentence is going to be. Anyway, time for the main event for the World Heavyweight Championship as the Rabid Wolverine Chris Benoit defends against the legend killer Randy Orton. Orton recently became #1 contender after winning a match a couple of weeks ago on Raw. Meanwhile, Chris Benoit's time as world champion has been considered by some to be somewhat of a disappointment because he's been eternally trapped in this Triple H vortex since winning the championship and has subsequently been roped into all this Eugene nonsense as well. I mean, truly, this is the kind of build that SummerSlam dreams are made of. Some "you screwed Brett" chants for Earl Hebner as the match gets underway. Some sound mat skills on display by Benoit here, keeping Orton down for a while. Orton hits a shoulder tackle, immediately pops the arms up for the pose. I love that. Orton goes for the sharpshooter. He actually gets it in. Folks, I think Dwayne Johnson can rest easy. I believe that I owe The Rock an apology because we now have a new contender for the worst sharpshooter I've ever seen. Benoit fights with the crossface. They make their way outside. Orton throws Benoit arm first into the ring post. Fighting on the apron, Benoit driving Orton face first the DDT, goes to hit a dive on the outside, but it gets nothing but barricade. Orton works the neck, brings him up onto his shoulder and drops the neck breaker. Let's have ourselves a nice Randy Orton chin lock. Benoit even gets his fingers bit at one point mid-hold. Big collision in the ring leads to a double down. The champ fighting back, hitting his forearms. Orton with a top rope cross body and a kick out. Benoit with the sharpshooter applied. Orton fights to get to those ropes. Benoit with German suplexes aplenty, 6 in all. JR saying on commentary, if I was Orton, I'd be saying 9. which is no. Benoit goes to the flying headbutt, but Orton puts the boots up. Chris fighting to get the crossface back on. Orton escapes, blocks another attempt, and hits the RKO out of nowhere, the cover, and the win. Randy Orton becomes the youngest world champ at the age of 24, breaks the record set by Brock Lesnar a couple years earlier. The Evolution music is playing, but we do not see Triple H, Flair, or Batista anywhere as Orton celebrates. Benoit re-enters the ring, puts out his hand, yells at him to be a man. Orton shakes and continues to celebrate as the show wraps up. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This was a terrific match. You know, we've said this a couple of times about Orton in his career up to this point, but this is definitely a star-making match here. I mean, it really proves that he can hang in the main event. I think Benoit did a great job working with this youngster into a really solid match that told a great story, and both guys looked good throughout all of it. It's funny because the last match we had all the bullshit, and this one we got none of it, and so I was very pleased to kind of end the show on a high note with that. You know, Benoit's reign ending where it is here, you know, he got it at WrestleMania and never really did anything except fight Triple H the whole time and then lose to Orton in a match with like 2 weeks of build. So it is kind of disappointing that that's how it all wraps up for Benoit after the chase that he had and the struggles and whatnot. They did a great job legitimizing Orton as a main eventer in this match. They would proceed to immediately spoil that in the next couple of months, and I've talked about it in my Unforgiven review, so go check that out. But for the time being here, in this moment, they did a good job making Orton look out to be a big deal. And hey, you know, 20 years later, he's still around, he's still at the highest level, still doing great work. And so yeah, they were definitely right in kind of pegging him as this future main eventer, this future star, because he's still around and still kicking. My grade for WWE SummerSlam 2004 is a B-. It's certainly a stronger show for me than the previous years. It's a big leap in quality from 03 to 04. A lot of strong moments on this show, and you can just look at the roster on this particular show, and it is so stacked with future legends and future potential. It's kind of mind-blowing to me to see like some of these guys like Orton and Cena and Batista in kind of these primordial phases where they're not quite the big stars they're going to become. And it's fun to watch that, you know. It's, you know, definitely an above average SummerSlam. I wouldn't say it was an amazing show, but it certainly was better than blah. It was better than, you know, 96 and 03, for example. So definitely a step up. But what did you think of SummerSlam 2004? How about this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Folks, it's been a blast covering SummerSlams from years past for the last month here on the channel. It's been really fun to look back at some of these great moments. And starting next month, all I have to say is the view never changes. Next classic review, we're looking at WCW Fall Brawl 1994. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.